Hi, I'm Nick, and welcome to Storytime. Batman Cataclysm is the story of the massive earthquake that struck Gotham in 1998 and began the series of events that led to no man's land when the federal government abandoned Gotham to the lawless rather than reconstruct it. Well, it all begins with Cataclysm, an event not long after Contagion, previously covered on this show, where Batman must once again face an enemy he cannot directly attack. The quake will kill many and leave many more trapped and in need of rescue. It's a story of human crisis, of human tragedy and triumph in a superhero context, in which even one of the most powerful superheroes in the world feels powerless. Let's begin. Detective Comics 719 ends with a prelude to Cataclysm as earthquake scientist Jolene Relazzo, who unknowingly works for Bruce Wayne, is picking up disturbing readings near Gotham. She attempts to call in the warning, but the Batcave is empty and the warning is missed. Man can walk upon the moon. He can build fine cities, explore the ocean deeps, and make the deserts bloom. But when the forces of nature conspire against him, when the great rock plates grind together and the very earth itself moves, all man can do is suffer. Cataclysm Part 1. Castles Built on Sand. He frowns as the images flicker for a moment. There is dead and unsettling silence. And suddenly, all hell breaks loose. That's the structural alarm. The seismic sensors. A roar like a turbine from hell fills his ears. The stone floor of the Batcave lurches beneath his feet as thousands of tons of solid rock are violently shaken. The computers automatically retract into their protective recesses. Kevlar canopies seal them in. Typically, his first thought is for the safety of others. Alfred! If the cave is so badly affected, what about the house above? And then the whole world seems to implode. Barbara Gordon falls from her wheelchair during the tremors and is knocked unconscious. Alfred is swallowed by the dining room floor as the room collapses. He disappears into the darkness below. Wayne Manor is only a mile from the epicenter of the quake. Its beams and bricks groan and buckle under the intolerable stress created by the heaving rock beneath it, and it topples into the abyss below. Stalagmites that took millennia to form crack like glass, plunging to the cave floor in a rain of destruction. The exit tunnel is still intact, barely. Perhaps he can drive out. The Batmobile is crushed. There's only one way out now, the passage that leads to the Drake house next door, Robin's secret getaway. But even that is denied him. An underground stream has been diverted by the shifting rock. It bursts over him with the force of a tsunami. A rock hits Batman in the head, and he is knocked unconscious, and the water carries him helplessly toward his fate. Teenage vigilante Anarchy and Detective Harvey Bullock are both closing in on the same gang of thugs when the quake hits the city. Shattering glass bursts outward onto the people into the street, killing several. Anarchy's line goes slack as the gargoyle he attached it to crumbles, leaving him falling toward the jagged glass. The quake has taken mere seconds to reach Gotham's midtown. Built on bedrock topped with shale, a potent amplifier for seismic waves as they undulate up and down, from side to side. The entire district is torn apart as if it were cardboard, its people swatted as if they were flies. Anarchy deftly flips and maneuvers safely to the ground amid the falling rubble. Harvey and Anarchy both take refuge in a sculpture of tubes, and Harvey tells Anarchy he's under arrest. First they have to run for cover before a gas leak explodes, barely escaping the blast zone. Anarchy says that people are in trouble, and he has to help them. Harvey can shoot him if he must, but Harvey soon runs after to help. Barbara Gordon regains consciousness and thanks her luck that her building is Wayne-owned, and several years back Bruce Wayne had earthquake-proofed all of his buildings in Gotham, despite the seeming lack of a need for it and much naysaying. Barbara sets off in her electric wheelchair to try and make it to police headquarters and find Jim Gordon. She passes a man stuck in denial trying to unpile rocks from a car, crushed so badly that no one could be alive within. The tortured roar of rock grinding on rock is done. A deathly silence hangs like a pall over the remains of Wayne Manor. The house which has stood for more than 100 years is virtually unrecognizable. Things will never be the same again. In the Batcave, the work of a lifetime is in shards. The only sound is the faint rasp of an old man's labored breathing. Less than 100 yards away, the world's greatest hero hangs precariously over the yawning chasm that has been ripped in the cave floor, mere seconds from doom. The news says that a 7.6 earthquake has struck Gotham just after 7 in the evening, the epicenter about 10 miles north of the city. Several people are trapped inside a city bus. The title of Part 2 is Shudder. The street is a confused jumble of concrete and vehicles. There's massive destruction across the city, and many parts are isolated by bridge collapses. Power is out everywhere, phone lines are down, and the water supply is precarious. The bus is stuck deep in a ravine and is slowly filling with water. Help is on the way. It has to be. Nightwing makes entry to Gotham by river from nearby Bloodhaven, where he operates. He can see Gotham already burning from the river, and he worries about Bruce, Alfred, and Barbara. Tim is safe in Europe, at least. In the bus, a mother comforts her child who has found a glow-in-the-dark toy to see with. The mother says that might not be a good thing, seeing the crushed bodies below them. Nightwing picks up several calls for help on his radio as he weaves through the rubble. The streets are ablaze. In the bus, a hurt man has a cell phone and the mother dials 911. Nightwing is passing by when he intercepts the 911 call. He gets our location and leaves the boat. The woman is put on hold as the phone's battery dies. She comforts her child with lies of rescue as his glow light gives out, trapping them in darkness. The path above them opens and Nightwing descends on a rope, shining a light just in time as the water is rising. Nightwing asks how many people there are and begins to carry people up one at a time, children the most injured first. The survivors take numbers to be rescued. The scared child asks Batman if he's going to save his mom too, and Nightwing says that he will. But Mom took a high number and is staying back to help the others. 9 trips and Nightwing is getting tired. Mom is the last one left when an aftershock hits and the fissure begins to close. Nightwing tells the trapped woman there's a larger opening at the front of the bus, but you'll have to swim to it. He says he'll be there waiting. They both pound on the glass, struggling to break it, when the fissure closes. Nightwing emerges from the water with the mother safely in tow. He thinks to himself to enjoy the small victory, because there's a long night ahead and happy endings won't be easy to come by. The title of Part 3 is Lifelines. Lucius Fox is preparing to end the day at Wayne Enterprises when the quake hits. The power and phones go out, but the building remains standing. The Wayne employees watch from their window as Gotham collapses like a house of cards. Lucius reassures the employees the building is built to withstand the quake, as all Wayne buildings are, even the homes he's built. 7:04 p.m. 4 of Gotham's tallest skyscrapers topple like dominoes, killing 749 people instantly and leaving 53 others with major and minor injuries. Had the quake occurred several hours earlier, deaths in these 4 buildings alone would have numbered in the thousands. 7:05 p.m. Ruptured gas mains begin exploding. 7:06 p.m. The first major fires already rage out of control. 7:07 p.m. The roof of the GCPD partially collapses and the bat signal falls through the roof into Jim Gordon's office, trapping him under rubble. Wayne Manor, the private home of Bruce Wayne himself, was ironically the sole Wayne real estate holding that could not be quake-proofed. Built directly above an extensive cavern network, part of the very fault along which the quake has traveled, the manor has absorbed the full brunt and fury of the forces unleashed. Part of the structure has, in fact, collapsed through the thin crumbled crust of its foundation, and now rests as rubble in the main chamber of the cavern system below.
Help! Dear God, please help me!
Alfred! Batman tells Alfred to hang on, and he throws a batarang around a rock just as the part holding his cape breaks off. Batman climbs up the cliff and finds Alfred buried under rubble. He'll have to be careful digging him out not to cause further collapse. Barbara Gordon rolls into police headquarters and fires a gun in the air for attention. She rallies her troops, convincing them the best way to help their own loved ones is not to abandon their post, but to organize a response. Her own father is still missing as well. She says that doing this means entrusting helping their loved ones to strangers, but the minute that quake hit, they all ceased being strangers. She orders the men to hook up an emergency generator to the radio transmitter. Without power, the radio network is the best way to communicate with all the rescue vehicles. Meanwhile, Batman has found something to prop up the wreckage hanging over Alfred, the giant penny. With a shove, Batman rolls the giant penny down the slope of the cave, shoulder checking it at the right moment to steer it to where it needs to be. The penny wedges under the layer of floor hanging over Alfred, and Bruce can finally free him. Alfred is fine, even making a joke about never expecting his life to be worth this penny. All the ways out of the cave are blocked. Bruce has to hope the quake will open up a new one under the water. Barbara gets crews organized to fight the fires first, having them link their hoses to bodies of water because the water lines are down. They also have fireboats with pumps fed straight from the river. Bullock enters with a large piece of metal stuck through his arm. With everyone too busy to help him, Bullock slams his arm against the wall to drive the metal to one end and grips it with his teeth. Holding his arm down with his other hand, he rips the metal out with his teeth. Barbara tells people to find anyone with medical training and mark them with large red crosses any way they can, and set them to work on the victims while others excavate. She also sent officers to check on the hospitals. Bullock sterilizes his wound with his flask and binds it himself. Upon finding out Jim Gordon is still missing, he sets off to find him. As Batman prepares scuba gear, Bullock finds the Commissioner. Alfred warns Bruce the stream could run for miles without reaching the surface, but it's a chance he has to take. The cave has become a trap he must escape. Bullock uses leverage to lift the rubble pinning Jim Gordon, and he is freed. The fire department does what it can to fight the blazing streets, and father and daughter are reunited at last. Batman has just begun his long swim when the first aftershock hits. I'm skipping certain chapters because they don't take place or have much to do with the Quake storyline. They were just scheduled in the publication order. Azrael transports Bane outside the city and he escapes during the quake, but Azrael recaptures him. The theater crowd was just heading for dinner when the 30-second shock hit. Wrong place, wrong time. The title of Part 5 is The First and the Last. The 80-floor Davenport Center falls over as one piece when the basement parking garages collapse. 5 million tons of steel, glass, and concrete with people trapped inside. It comes to rest on the Gotham Electric Building 4 blocks north. A death sentence hangs over the city's cultural center. Huntress learns all this later. She was on the subway when it hit. At first she thinks it's just a derailment, but it soon becomes a Huntress situation, and Helena changes in the dark. She tells the people trapped that she can help them, but she is soon interrupted. It's a criminal who assumes she's there for him. He hits her with his gun, knocking her down. Huntress narrowly escapes as the criminal opens fire on her after killing a passenger who tried to reason with him. He and the others try to make their own way to the surface through the tunnels. Through a radio, they realize there's been a quake. Huntress can't risk letting him fire again with the gas mains ruptured, but when he tries to spark a lighter, she has no choice but to move. Huntress tackles him, yelling at the people to move away from her voice. He gets her in his sights again, though. The aftershock hits, and the man now screams for help. Huntress says the irony is that he killed the only man who might have been able to help him. She's not even strong enough to move the rubble with her wounded arm. He tries to shoot her, but his gun is empty. Huntress leaves him to his fate, and leaves the others to safety. Batman wouldn't agree with what she's done, but if saving scum like him is the price of being in his little club, she'd rather stay out. She thinks she's the kind of hero Gotham deserves. Harold, Bruce's mute helper, has tunneled away to Alfred from a safe area. Meanwhile, Bruce is swimming through the opened caves. The aftershock closes the path behind him. Bruce thinks that to get help into the cave he'll have to expose his identity, but it was bound to happen eventually anyway. Bruce thinks that it's his own fault. He should have mapped these waterways years ago. He has only one chance to get this right and so many ways to get it wrong. He squeezes through a narrow passage. He emerges into a current and has to fight being swept away. He loses his grip and hits his head, cracking his mask and tumbling toward a crevice. The current weakens as the passage widens and the temperature changes, telling Bruce he's in the harbor. He makes for the surface. Once Batman surfaces, he sees that it's not just the manor. All of Gotham is crushed and burning, and he finally sees the real problem. Catwoman attempts the daring daytime robbery of a pair of binoculars from a busy store in a mall. The title of Part 6 is Claustrophobia. She snags the binoculars she needs for a real job and goes back through the air vents. She's in the elevator shaft when the quake hits. She falls to the elevator car, but the cables begin to snap. In free fall, following the elevator, she manages to whip a pole and swing to relative safety. She catches a ledge and barely avoids tons of rubble crashing behind her. Catwoman crawls through the wreckage through a narrow space and pops her head out into a clearing. The mall has been devastated. Shelves and floors are crushed everywhere, trapping people. A security guard pulls a gun on her, assuming she's responsible because of her mask. She whips the gun out of his hand. Catwoman says she doesn't kill, and the guard says that by not helping a little girl nearby, she's killing right now. Catwoman goes to see what she can do, but the girl has a punctured lung. The guard accidentally causes more collapse, killing the people he was trying to save, and Catwoman tries to give the girl CPR. There's nothing either of them can do. She's dead. Catwoman starts freaking out, thinking she has to get away and be alone. She leaps to the ceiling and begins to frantically climbing up the levels of wreckage. She makes it to a window and uses her new binoculars. Catwoman sees the devastation across all of Gotham, buildings and roads in a crumpled heap. She comes back down, telling the guard they're on their own. There are 6 survivors, including them, and Catwoman begins helping them up to the exit she found. Outside, they gather on the fire escape. Catwoman swings across the gap to the neighboring building with a survivor hanging on, and comes back for another. She rests for just a moment before seeing what else she can do. In that moment, she grieves. I'm also skipping Robin because he's out of town during the quake. He flies back at the end and sees Gotham burning from the plane window. Blackgate Prison houses over 2,000 prisoners and 200 guards, sitting on an island in Gotham's Bay. The title of Part 8 is Isle of Men. Jared is a criminal sentenced to die at midnight, and though he swears his innocence, his every appeal has been exhausted. His caseworker empathizes with him, but it is cold comfort. A nun is there to offer last rites. The quake hits the island and breaks open the concrete shell of the prison's outer wall and ruptures cells and walkways within, including Jared's. Waves rush into the gaps and begin to flood the prison. The prisoners beg for the cells to be opened, but the guard in the control room is killed before he can pull the lever. Jared is free, though, and begins to swim toward it. Some cells respond and some don't. Those who can swim to freedom, and those who can't drown. Jared returns to the lawyer and the nun to try and guide them to safety. They head for the stairs. Jared and his charges make it to the first tier, but so do the other prisoners, and the guards fear being overwhelmed. Their fears are well founded, and soon the prisoners control what remains of the prison, freeing the others as Jared and the others climb across a narrow path. In the infirmary, Jared tends to the nun's wounds. She too now believes in his innocence, seeing how he's acted in this crisis. No one who acted so heroically could have murdered a mother and her 2 children. Just then, the KG Beast breaks through their barricade, angry that Jared didn't free him. Jared tackles the much larger man, yelling at the others to run. They slip past the fight, and Beast throws Jared through a glass window. Catman swings out of nowhere to attack the Beast, claiming he was just robbing cells. He distracts the Beast and dives away while Jared and friends escape. Batman surfaces and sees the situation at Blackgate, intercepting a nearby helicopter's radio. The choppers hover out of range of the prisoner's fire, and Batman weighs the situation. With enough courage, anyone can help the people trapped in Gotham's rubble, but few men are equipped to handle the situation at Blackgate. Though exhausted from the swim, he sprints for the bay. Jared has made it to the highest point they can go before reaching the prisoners on the roof. The prisoners begin to make use of a crude land bridge thrown up by the quake. Batman swims past them, reporting the situation to the choppers as he makes entry, knowing there are hostages inside. Batman disarms the prisoners and quickly infiltrates the levels of the prison. He's taking out multiple opponents with each movement, a machine of efficiency. The rescue choppers have half an hour of fuel left, and they'll need 10 minutes to get back to land. Batman tells them that's good enough. KG Beast, however, has found Jared and the Innocents, and he kicks a boulder down towards them. Jared supports a beam with his body, protecting the Innocents. KG Beast piles on more weight from above as Batman reaches the roof, throwing a smoke bomb and telling the choppers to move in. In the smoke, Batman quickly takes down the last of the armed prisoners. The choppers move in, their rotors clearing the smoke. By the time they land, Batman is gone, fighting the KG Beast. Jared tells the others to let go and escape while they can. Just then the aftershock hits, crumbling the land bridge with people still on it. Batman is taking the Beast down, but the nun won't leave Jared. He tells her that he lied about his innocence, that he did do it. Batman puts the Beast down with a kick, and Jared says that not only did he kill those 2 kids, they were his. The nun and the lawyer back away to safety. The floor collapses under the nun, and the lawyer grabs her. Batman saves the nun and tells the lawyer to get on his back. Jared tells her to do it. He's the Dark Angel they wanted. Batman swings away as Jared is crushed. It is 1 minute past midnight. Jared has met his execution on schedule. Batman leads them to the roof and the helicopters. Of the 2,103 men on Blackgate, 1,761 are still alive. 239 are missing, escaped, or dead. The nun, thinking about Jared, says that he did lie, but when? And about what? 10 p.m. 3 hours after the quake, and Batman finally makes it to Gotham. The title of Part 9 is The Naked City. Batman is used to fighting crime, finding clues, solving riddles, uncovering motives. But this? Fighting killers and madmen, this he knows. But a city turned against itself, helpless. A wave of despair threatens to overcome him. What can one man do against all this? But he hears a small cry for help coming from the rubble of a cafe, and he springs into action. After all, if he'd ever stopped to wonder what difference one man can make, there never would have been a Batman. He digs the man out, wondering what's happened to Jim and Barbara Gordon, Alfred and Harold, and Ace the Bat-Hound. He hands out painkillers and energy tablets from his utility belt, and he tells the survivors to stick together and make for police headquarters, and then Wayne Tower should be standing. All the quake-proof Wayne buildings will be serving as shelters during the crisis. Batman finds some homeless people he knows trapped in a restaurant. The girder holding up the rubble is already squeaking. Batman holds up the rubble while the bums rush out, diving to safety just as a beam breaks. They say that now the whole city will be living on the streets and will know how they feel. Batman tells them too to head for the police headquarters to see if they can help. Meanwhile, earthquake scientist Jolene Relazzo is kidnapped by thugs working for someone unknown. Batman realizes there are probably people trapped on every block of the city, and an aftershock hits as he's swinging on a line, causing him to fall and has to use his cape to land safely. The despair threatens to rise again, but then he has an idea. Penguin is making plans to loot the remains of Gotham when Batman enters his lair. At police headquarters, Barbara Gordon has set up a triage for the victims and is coordinating rescue efforts as survivors trickle in from all over the city. Batman says that the old rules are dead and buried. He knows that Penguin is involved in 100 illegal enterprises, and says the sooner things get back to normal, the better it'll be for him. And with that in mind, he asks the Penguin for help. He offers only his promise that if the Penguin doesn't help, Batman will make his life as miserable as he possibly can. Penguin wisely agrees to aid with the rescue efforts. And Batman leads an army of Penguin's thugs out into the night, for once in their narrow, brutal lives, to help their fellow man. Just then, a broadcast is sent from the GCTV building. A villain calling himself the Quakemaster says that he caused the quake with unknown technology, and he demands a ransom of $100 million, or he will burn what's left of Gotham to the ground. Batman Cataclysm will be concluded in Part 2.